Hello, and welcome to the Daily Rings of Power podcast, your not-so-daily dose of the latest news, rumours, and speculation about the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. The day is Tuesday, March 21st, and I'm your host, Harry. I hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. I should probably begin by apologising for taking a several-month hiatus from the podcast. It was neither expected nor planned, and explaining all the reasons why I took this time off would actually be a waste of your own listening time. I may talk a little bit more about it at the end of the episode, as well as my plans for the podcast going forward. But I will say thank you to everyone who sent me kind messages over the last few months, politely asking when it would return. I know I have listeners from all over the world, everywhere from Germany to Brazil, from the US to New Zealand. Having this community that defies borders and time zones is really a special privilege for me. So I really do mean it when I say that I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. It's great to be back. However, we're not going to waste any time today, as we are going back to where this podcast originally started, and that means we're going to begin covering everything we know about Season 2. I was planning on making one giant episode about everything we know, from casting to filming to leaks and rumours, but frankly, I got so excited after we received more casting news yesterday that I decided that there was no sense in waiting any longer. So today, we're going to cover all 18 of the new cast members for Season 2 that have been officially announced by Amazon. We'll dive into their career history, looking at what movies, TV shows and stage productions they've been part of. I'll also try to connect the dots where there are connections between our cast members who have worked together on previous productions. We'll even do a bit of speculation about what role or type of character they could be playing. And finally, I'll offer some recommendations of their previous work that you should watch, or, where I haven't seen their filmography, pick some entries that I'll be seeking out to watch. But as those of you who are returning listeners will know, we must never start an episode of this podcast without a reading from the Professor's work. Today's reading comes from the Silmarillion, of the Rings of Power and the Third Age. Men proved easier to ensnare. Those who used the 9 rings became mighty in their day. Kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old. They obtained glory and great wealth, yet it turned to their undoing. They had, as it seemed, unending life, yet life became unendurable to them. They could walk, if they would, unseen by all eyes in the world beneath the sun, and they could see things in worlds invisible to mortal men. But too often they beheld only the phantoms and delusions of Sauron. And one by one, sooner or later, according to their native strength and to the good or evil of their wills in the beginning, they fell under the thraldom of the ring that they bore, and under the domination of the One, which was Sauron's. And they became for ever invisible save to him that wore the ruling ring, and they entered into the realm of shadows. The Nazgul were they, the Ringwraiths, the enemy's most terrible servants. Darkness went with them, and they cried with the voices of death. I chose that reading because with 18 new cast members having been announced, I have to expect that at least some of these actors will be portraying future Ringwraiths. And if I'm wrong, well, you still have to love Tolkien describing the 9 as if they're part of Middle-earth's greatest metal band. Now, as I said at the top of the show, we've got 3 sets of casting announcements to get through. I'll go through each announcement in chronological order and through each cast member as they were announced in the press release. If you need to refresh your memory or want to follow along at home, I'll include a link to Amazon's press releases in the episode description. But without further ado, let's begin. On the 1st of December, we got our first announcements of new cast members for Season 2, with 7 actors being announced as new additions to the show. First up, we have British-Nigerian actor Gabriel Akudike. Much like a lot of the original Season 1 cast, Akudike is not a name that's going to be known to a lot of fans, having mainly starred in supporting roles in British TV shows, but recently appeared as a series regular in the 3rd season of Hannah, another Amazon Studios production. I admittedly haven't seen any of his work outside of places where he's been more of a background character, such as in the film 1917, but given his extensive theatre background, I'm sure he'll be a fine addition to the cast. If I were to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if he was another elf we're going to meet in Season 2. I don't really have anything to base that on, but with his sharp angular features, I could definitely see Akudike playing that type of character. The next cast announcement was Yisun Ator. Ator is probably best known to most people in the wider fantasy fandom for playing Cohen, one of Geralt's compatriots in Season 2 of Netflix's The Witcher. However, his most prominent role in a streaming show is probably in the Netflix production of Young Wallander, where he's appeared in a series regular role across both seasons. He's also appeared in a number of other TV shows, film and stage productions. Now admittedly I've only seen Yisun in The Witcher, where I thought he did a fine job. Whilst only a supporting role, in a show that had a lot of forgettable characters, I thought Yisun and his co-star Paul Bullion did a great job of bringing some personality to the two Witchers. Given his experience on that show, I'm sure he'll fit right into a fantasy production, and hopefully be able to bring some of that stunt fight training to bear. I'll also say there's a wonderful interview with Yisun on the Cool America Magazine YouTube channel, where he talks about, among other topics, his inspiration to get into acting when he was growing up in Morocco, his career journey, and I have to say he comes across as an absolutely lovely gentleman. I'll link the interview in the episode description. On to our next new cast addition. This is a very interesting one, with the addition of Ben Daniels to the cast. For British listeners, Daniels is probably one of the most familiar faces among this first group of new cast members, having been a staple of British TV for 3 decades. He might be best known internationally for his role as Princess Margaret's husband, Lord Snowdon, on Season 3 of Netflix's The Crown. He also appeared in one of Netflix's first big hit shows, House of Cards, where he appeared as the all-too-smooth photographer and romantic interest, Adam Galloway. A show he's appeared in which I haven't seen, but am now very interested to seek out, was the recent television series The Exorcist, which acts as a sequel of sorts to the famous horror flick from 1973. As a huge admirer of the original film, I think I'll have to check this one out. Most impressively, he's also an award-winning actor on stage, having won an Olivier Award for his work in All My Sons, as well as having been nominated multiple times for both Olivier and Tony Awards. Now, I admit I haven't seen any of his performances on stage, I haven't been lucky enough to see those, but I hear from people who have that he's an absolutely fantastic theatre performer, so hopefully, much like a lot of his existing compatriots on Rings of Power, he can really bring that stage presence to the show. However, The Rings of Power isn't his only ongoing role in a major TV adaptation. Having been cast in Season 2 of Apple TV's Foundation series, I am looking forward to checking out this piece of his latest work when that releases later this year. As for his role in Season 2 of Rings of Power, well, I've heard some people speculate that if this show does decide in some way to adapt the Anatar plot for Season 2, he'd be a perfect opposite number for Charles Edward Celebrimbor given their similarity in age. I could possibly see that happening, and I think I'd like to see that happen, but I do wonder if the show might want a radically different look for an Anatar-type character. Therefore, I'll give my best second guess and say he might appear as perhaps a ruling figure in Pelargir, where the Southlands refugees are headed. But if he turns out to be Anatar, you'll hear no complaints from me. Moving on, we have our only new cast member who is joining as a recast for an existing role, that being Sam Hazeldine, who is replacing Joseph Maul as Adar. Now, I talked about this recasting at length on Twitter when the news came out, so I won't go over it in depth. But as I said at the time, what I have heard from sources close to the production is that Maul's departure came about due to issues between the actor and other members of the production's cast and crew. This was also reported by Fellowship of Fans at the time, so I do feel comfortable in sharing that. However, I also recognise that these issues are really a private matter for the individuals involved, and I don't feel that it's my place to speculate further. I greatly enjoyed Joseph's portrayal of the character in Season 1, and I am sad to see him go, but I also want to go into Season 2 with an open mind, and I hope that Sam is able to deliver a worthy successor performance. As for Hazeldine himself, he's another prominent British TV actor who's been around for the last 2 decades. Most notably for me, Hazeldine played a solid supporting role in Season 2 of Peaky Blinders, and most recently played the character of Barnaby in Netflix's adaptation of Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Whilst not a large role, I'd also recommend the Apple TV series Slow Horses. Hazeldine only plays a minor role in the first season, but I'll be honest, It's just too good a TV show not to recommend to you all. But it's his role in Sandman which has me most excited for his portrayal of Adar. I won't give spoilers if you haven't seen The Sandman, but his character in that show had an incredibly menacing aspect, but also an ability to mask that darkness. Fingers crossed, he'll bring some of those excellent qualities as Adar. Moving on from very seasoned actors to a newer face in the industry, we have the addition of Amelia Kenworthy, a recent graduate from the RADA School in 2021. She's also appeared since then in 2 short films, IRL and Messenger. There's very little other information to go on with Kenworthy. However, she seemed very excited to join the cast, having posted a picture on her Instagram with copies of Tolkien books, including The Silmarillion. In classic Amazon Studios fashion, I suspect they gave her a telling off for even sharing that, as it's since been deleted. Given Kenworthy's striking blonde hair and blue eyes, some people have already wildly speculated she could be playing Galadriel's daughter, Celebrian. I think that's probably unlikely, unless Galadriel also failed to mention her daughter existing in Season 1. But who knows? Maybe they're estranged, maybe she's off with Celeborn somewhere, but let's just say I'm not a believer that Kenworthy's going to be playing Celebrian. Come back to me when I'm wrong and laugh at me. I've also heard others suggest that given her relatively young age, she could play a Harfoot. But again, I doubt we're going to meet any new Harfoot characters next season. Apart from that, I can't say I have any particular guesses as to who she might be playing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Answers on a postcard, please. Our penultimate new cast member from this first announcement was Nya Tal. Much like Kenworthy, Nya is relatively junior among the new cast, having graduated from the Guildhall School of Drama in 2021. However, aside from appearing in a couple of short films, last year she appeared in Netflix's film adaptation of Jane Austen's novel Persuasion. I regret to report that I haven't seen this film, but I'll endeavour to give it a watch in the coming months to get a preview of her acting. Once again, this is a very difficult one. I have no clue what role she might be playing, but given her relatively newcomer status, perhaps we could assume she's in a minor role. Then again, we all know what happens when we assume things. Our final new cast member announced on December 1st was the veteran actor Nicholas Woodison, who is one of those faces that I immediately recognised. As an actor who first appeared on British TV screens in 1980, he's one of those actors you will have inevitably seen in one production or another. He's perhaps best known internationally for his role as Posca in HBO's Rome series, which as a side note is one of my favourite productions from the early 2000s, and I'd love if we've got more cast members from that show. A little note to myself here, I genuinely wrote that line in the script wishing for more Rome cast members before we got yesterday's announcement. I wrote that line days ago. However, my gift of foresight seems to be working once again. Woodison has also appeared in a plethora of films, from Kenneth Branagh's Conspiracy, Sam Mendes' Skyfall, and Armando Iannucci's The Death of Stalin. As I said, while he's not often played a leading role, Woodison has always been a fantastic addition to an ensemble cast. Given his senior standing, there are a couple of potential roles that come to mind when I think about Woodison. If the show is granted the rights to tell the story of Elendil's father, Amandil, then I think Woodison would be a fantastic choice to bring real charm and wisdom to that character. Alternatively, I could see him as a Dwarven Lord, given that we should expect to meet some of the other recipients of the Seven Rings sooner rather than later. However, as with all these cast members, this could be a minor role or an original character. But whatever character he's playing, I'm excited to see Woodison on screen once again. Continuing on with new cast members, a week after this first announcement, we received another from Amazon. This time with an additional 8 new cast being revealed. First up from this second batch is Oliver Alvin Wilson. Once again, Alvin Wilson isn't an actor I'm very familiar with. However, he is yet another actor to join the Rings of Power with a very strong theatre pedigree, having appeared in numerous Shakespearean productions in the West End, as well as a stage adaptation of the very famous TV show The Twilight Zone. He's also had a number of minor roles on British TV and a handful of films, but sadly nothing that I can attest to having watched. I did manage to watch his showreel online, and gathering what I can from that, I'm confident that he'll bring a lot of charisma and charm to whatever role he's playing. And despite not having a significant background in TV, I continue to trust in the Rings of Power casting team, who have found fantastic stage actors that have brought tremendous portrayals to the screen. Next up, we move on to Stuart Bowman, who is one of the new cast that I am familiar with. A Scottish actor with decades of experience on both screen and stage, Bowman has an impressive CV of past work. I immediately recognised him from the 2016 BBC series Bodyguard, which if you've never seen before, I highly recommend for fans of the political thriller genre, or just people who like a bit of entertaining TV. However, Bowman has also had a main role in the multi-season period drama Versailles, and for something lighter, he was a series regular in the sitcom Gary, Tank Commander. Funnily enough, there is a loose connection to Lord of the Rings through his stage work, having appeared alongside Billy Boyd in a 2013 production of Macbeth at the Globe. Another fun fact for fantasy TV fans, that production was directed by House of the Dragon cast member Eve Best. Now, having seen Bowman in Bodyguard, I would not be surprised if he's playing a villainous character, or at least a morally grey character in a position of authority. He brings a real intensity to his performances, and he has one of those automatically commanding presences. If I had to guess his role, I think someone in the Númenórean royal court could be a likely option. In fact, I'll go a step further and make a bold prediction that Bowman could be a significant character, one who ends up becoming one of the Númenórean lords who receives a Rings of Power and becomes one of the Nazgûl. Now, I have absolutely no evidence for this prediction, so as always, feel free to come back and remind me when I am once again wrong. Moving back from the familiar to the unfamiliar with our next new cast member, Gavi Singh Chera. Much like Kenworthy, he's another RADA alumni, having graduated the year before her in 2020. Most recently, he had a recurring role in the Channel 4 thriller The Undeclared War, and I'll make sure to give that a watch in the coming months. Unsurprisingly, given his graduation from RADA, Gavi had a busy 2020, appearing in a number of stage productions, including a main role in a performance of Anton Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. Once again, I'm just going to assume that the casting team have found another promising young actor for the show, and I'm excited to see what he brings. Much like Kenworthy, I'll be interested to see if Gavi and any of these relatively inexperienced actors will be thrust into prominent roles, or perhaps more likely will be appearing as supporting characters. I had originally thought that Gavi could make an interesting Celeborn, but after looking up his background and seeing how young he is, that might be an unlikely pick, but we'll have to wait and see. On to our next new cast member. I have to admit, listeners, that I've really come up short on this one, and I promise it's not for a lack of trying. With each of these actors, I've been diligently researching their backgrounds, going through their IMDb, agency profiles, and any interviews I can find. However, for our next one, I struggled. William Chubb is clearly an experienced British actor who has dozens of credits in British TV and stage productions, and even had a minor role in the 2022 film by Sam Mendes, Empire of Light. However, the amount of information available about Chubb online is frankly sparse, and despite having appeared in one episode of The Sandman, I have to admit that I can't remember seeing him in the show. To be clear, this is no slight on the actor. My TV watching is not as extensive as many, and it may just be that he's a more private individual who doesn't attract many headlines. But there is more news here. Chubb is one of the only actors whose role in Season 2 may have been leaked, in an exclusive reveal by the ever-insightful Fellowship of Fans. Now, whilst the character revealed is an original one, rather than someone from Tolkien's writing, I know some people will want to avoid this kind of leak and any potential spoilers. So what I'm going to do is keep that to a future episode where we'll discuss this kind of leaks. If you do want to know now without waiting, I'll link the reveal by Fellowship of Fans in the show notes. In what is perhaps a 180-degree turnaround from our last actor, our next cast member is not exactly an unknown to me. Kevin Eldon was probably the most well-known name to me among the second batch of actors announced, as an English actor and comedian that will probably be familiar to most of my fellow listeners from the UK. Eldon was a staple feature of British comedy TV series in the 1990s, and has over 160 credits to his name during his long career. Listeners from outside the UK who aren't familiar with him are probably most likely to know Eldon for his role in the brilliant Edgar Wright comedy Hot Fuzz, or for his small cameo roles as one of the Gold Cloak City Guards and also a Bravo C actor in Game of Thrones. Now, given his comedy pedigree, I can only hope that whatever character he's playing in Season 2 is plenty of fun and allows him the room to show off his comedic talents. A natural assumption might be that he's a dwarven character or a Harfoot, if we meet any new Harfoots in Season 2, but there is another character he could be playing. Now, this is another one of these rumours or leaks we've heard about, so again, I apologise, I'm going to leave that to a future episode. But let's just say, if you follow me on Twitter, you know it's a character I'm not particularly fond of, so let's hope I'm wrong about that one. Next up is another very recognisable TV actor, with Will Keane joining Season 2. Keane will be best known to most listeners for playing one of the antagonists in the brilliant BBC adaptation of His Dark Materials. He's also another former cast member from The Crown, having appeared in Season 1 as the Queen's private secretary, Michael Adine. Keane has had a long career on stage and screen, and will no doubt bring all of that experience to bear in this show. It would be very easy to typecast Keane as a possible villain in the next season, given his tremendous performance in His Dark Materials. So, that's exactly what I'm going to assume. There's something about his piercing stare that I think would almost be wasted on a good and noble character. However, if they did want to go a different route, I could also potentially see him playing Círdan the Shipwright, who we know is one of the confirmed canon characters being introduced in Season 2. Give Keane a wig and pointy ears, and I could definitely see him bringing that gravitas to a character as wise and noble as Círdan. Moving to our penultimate new cast member to be officially announced by Amazon, we have Selena Lowe. In contrast to many of the other new cast, while still a relatively young actress, Lowe's background is primarily in film rather than TV, with particular experience in action roles. Lowe's most significant credits were in the 2022 reboot of Hellraiser and the 2021 sci-fi action film Boss Level, where she starred alongside Frank Grillo, Mel Gibson, Naomi Watts, and recent Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh. In the cast announcement, Amazon particularly highlighted Lowe's martial arts background, and it's easy to see why when looking at her filmography. Whilst I have to admit I haven't seen all of Boss Level, it is available on Prime Video, and while researching for this episode, I did watch a short fight scene between Lowe and Frank Grillo. It's more than fair to say that Lowe is a skilled stunt fighter, and I would have to expect that whatever role she'll be taking on in Season 2, it will be one that involves some measure of swordplay. Who knows? Perhaps we'll see more fancy elven fighting at work after we got just a brief taste from Galadriel and Arondir in Season 1. Either way, it's fantastic to have more actors on board with great experience in stunt fighting, because as we know, there's only going to be more battles to come in future seasons. And finally, last but certainly not least, we round out our final cast announcement from the second batch with Callum Lynch. Another British actor, Lynch is undoubtedly best known for his role as Theo Sharp on Netflix's hit TV series Bridgerton. Now, once again, I am rather ashamed to admit that I have not seen a single episode of Bridgerton, but I know it has a large fan base, and perhaps one of my listeners can enlighten me as to his performance in the show. I can't promise I'm going to check it out, but who knows, maybe I'll get round to it in the coming months. Outside of TV, Lynch also played a significant role in the 2020 adaptation of Black Beauty, and also in the 2021 film Benediction. Now, this is actually a film I've been planning to watch for a while, because the subject matter interests me. And another fun fact here, Lynch was joined in this film by fellow Season 2 joining cast member Ben Daniels. So if you want to give Benediction a watch, you'll get 2 for the price of 1. Now, as to who Lynch might be playing, those of you on Twitter will know that there is already a passionate group of fans who have become set on the idea that Lynch will be playing Galadriel's missing husband, Celeborn. Visual comparisons have already been driven between Lynch and Martin Sokas, the actor who played Celeborn in Peter Jackson's trilogy. Now, I'm not saying that means anything, and I would, of course, urge caution on anyone who is getting their hopes up on a particular actor playing any specific character, as that so often leads to disappointment. However, I will say that given his relatively close age to Mordovith Clark, and as an actor whose career very much seems to be on the ascendancy, I'll put myself in the camp of saying that Lynch could be playing our Silver Clan. I'm not saying in any way it's a guarantee, but let's just say it might not be a bad bet. Now at this point, we should say that following these 2 cast announcements, there was many months of silence. In that time, I suspect many of us had thought that we would see no more announcements. After all, 15 new cast members seemed like a lot already. How wrong we were when just yesterday, on March 20th, we were blessed with another cast announcement. And whilst it may have only included 3 new actors, these 3 might have gotten the loudest and most excited reaction from the fans. Where do I begin with our first of these new cast members, Ciarán Hinds? For those who have been hoping for the show to augment their roster of talented young actors with some larger and more experienced names, Ciarán Hinds is exactly who you're looking for. Hinds has such an extensive filmography that it's hard to even pick out the best parts. Obviously, many will remember him for his role as Julius Caesar in Rome, where he shared the screen with one of our previous new cast members, Nicholas Woodison. Other fans of more recent fantasy television will spot him as the familiar face of Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall in Game of Thrones. Or more recently, perhaps keen viewers will remember him as Sir John Franklin in Season 1 of The Terror, where he also shared the screen with Rings of Power Season 1 alumni Charles Edwards and Tristan Gravel. His list of appearances in films is no shabbier. Here's just a few examples. He's starred in Steven Spielberg's Munich, Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood, Martin Scorsese's Silence, and most recently Kenneth Branagh's Belfast, the last of which garnered him nominations for Best Supporting Actor at both the Academy Awards and the BAFTAs. Now all of this is without even mentioning his illustrious stage career that dates back to the 1970s, and which I have to sadly admit I have seen none of these, after closely missing out on tickets I had to go and see his starring performance in Uncle Vanya in 2020. As you can see, my point is that Ciarán Hinds is an unbelievably experienced actor, and any of you who have seen his performances will know the kind of gravitas but also emotional depth he can bring to a role. This is one of those actors where I will truly say, I don't mind who or what type of character he's playing, as long as he is given plenty to do and some excellent dialogue to deliver. Even if we were to only get him for 1 season, I would consider it an excellent choice. If I had to make a guess, I would suggest that his natural ability to project leadership and authority would be perfect for a Númenórean lord, or dare I say it, a future Nazgul. He could even pass for Lloyd Owen's father if they did want to have a major actor play Amandil. But once again, I don't know whether the show has rights to that character. And truly, when it comes to who Ciarán is playing, I really don't mind. My only rule is this: the more Ciarán Hinds, the better. The second of our new cast announced yesterday was such a fantastic surprise to me. Rory Kinnear is, as I said on Twitter, one of the most underrated actors in British film and television working today. He's an actor that I have particularly come to appreciate in recent years, and getting to see him in a show that I am so passionate about will be an absolute delight. For me, talking about Kinnear has to begin with his role as the creature, or Frankenstein's monster, in the tragically underappreciated Penny Dreadful. If I could recommend one show to watch that includes a new cast member, it would be a hard choice between this show and Rome. Kinnear's performance in Penny Dreadful was delightfully complex and heartfelt, and thankfully he was at least recognised for it with a Satellite Award for Best Supporting Actor. Outside of that, many of you who frequent Twitter and online fandoms will recognise him most recently from Our Flag Means Death, playing what I can only describe as a dual role. However, his work on the Daniel Craig James Bond films, his appearances in The Imitation Game and Peterloo are also worthy of recognition, not to mention appearing last year in Men, a film by one of my favourite directors, Alex Garland. Most recently, his title role in the biographical comedy film Bank of Dave was another great demonstration of Kinnear's ability to play to those comedic ranges as well as the more sincere emotional notes. And if you're looking for a Rings of Power connection, then he also starred in the BBC drama series Years and Years, alongside our very own Isildur, Maxim Baldry. And just like Ciarán Hinds, it would be remiss of me not to mention his career on stage, for which he has won multiple awards across his career as an actor, playwright and director, including Olivier Awards for both Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. Once again, I couldn't pretend to be sure what sort of role Amazon will have picked Kinnear for. I think given his ability to have such warmth, his skills to play with comedic scenes, and yet his ability to deliver beautiful monologues, I am going to go out on a limb and say that he would make a wonderful Na'vi. I can certainly imagine the layers Kinnear could bring to a character like Na'vi, who's one of Tolkien's characters who, yes, is a famous name, but there is so little written about who he was or what he was like. Ultimately, much like Hines, I'll be grateful for just having Kinnear on screen for as much time as possible. And after all that, we still have one cast member to go. I admit, I do feel a little bit ashamed because after heaping praise on both Hines and Kinnear, I have to admit I have seen much less of our final new cast member, Tanya Moody. However, that is only a strike against myself, not Moody. I know Moody best for her role as Meg in the hilarious British comedy series Motherland, for which she won a Breakthrough Award from the Royal Television Society in 2020. Not only should you watch Motherland for, well, a classic example of British comedy writing at its finest, but also Moody was undeniably excellent in the show. Outside of that, Moody had a main role in the fantasy television series A Discovery of Witches. Whilst I haven't seen the show yet, I've been reliably informed by many people on Twitter that it is worth a watch and that Moody was an excellent part of a rather large ensemble cast, which to me sounds like an excellent precursor to starring in another fantasy show, which also has a large ensemble cast. Much like our other actors, Moody has also had an impressive career on stage, having been nominated for numerous awards, including 2 Olivier Awards in separate productions. Her film credits are likely to only increase from here, having also appeared last year in Empire of Light. Much like Kinnear, I would love if Moody was given a role that allowed her humour and natural charisma to shine through. At the same time, her storyline in Motherland demonstrated an ability to play a role with some really challenging emotional moments, and at other times delivering withering scorn. If I'm being honest, I would love to see Moody play an elven character, maybe adding to that feel of Gil-galad's royal court in Lindon. It's an area where I think we need some more characters to fill out that court to make it feel like a real kingdom, and I would love if Moody was part of that, because I know that she could bring both grace and charisma and authority to that role. But once again, whatever role Moody is playing, I can't wait to see it. And yes, I know, after 18 new cast announcements, I probably sound like a broken record, but it's true. I'm just so excited to see all of these new cast members in Season 2. And that, dear listeners, concludes our tour of all the officially announced cast for Season 2. Now, diligent fans will know that old and new Twitter accounts who share leaks such as Fellowship of Fans and this season's Rings of Power thoughts have also shared actors who are reportedly appearing. I'm not going to cover these in today's episode for 2 reasons. Firstly, if Season 1 is anything to go by, any actors playing characters with significant screen time and speaking parts will be officially announced by Amazon. So these other characters are most likely playing background characters, extras, or single line parts. Secondly, and most importantly, at the time of writing, I have already put down over 5,000 words for this script, just for these officially announced cast members, and I don't want this episode to drag on forever. Therefore, I'll say that if people do want me to dig into these actors' backgrounds who have been rumoured or leaked, drop me a comment on Twitter and I'll get it into our future episode where we talk about other rumours from Season 2's production. So that brings us to the end of my first podcast episode in quite a long time. I really do hope you enjoyed it and didn't find the quite repetitive format of looking at each actor too much of a slog. But equally, if you did find it tiring, let me know so I can improve any future Season 2 updates. As for what comes next after this episode, well, I want to avoid making too many firm promises. I've done that before, and I don't want to disappoint you like I did last time. Ideally, my next episode will cover the remaining news for Season 2, including the new directors we have on board, as well as diving into all the filming leaks, rumours, and gossip that we've heard about. In an ideal world, I would return to my plan of producing episodes looking at Season 1's different character arcs, other episodes that dive into the previous work of our cast members, and of course, more episodes with guests from our lovely Tolkien online community. But also, I feel that what might be best for this podcast is just to let you tell me what kind of content you'd like to hear. If you do have an idea for a topic or theme that I should explore in an episode, please let me know by leaving a comment or sending me a message on Twitter. As I said, I don't want to promise if and when these will come out, but I give you my word that I will do my best to return to a more regular format. As I said at the top of the show, It really is a blessing to be part of this community and have so many wonderful listeners. The hiatus I took was largely for personal reasons and has nothing to do with the community or the show or a lack of desire to talk about it. It's just been a tricky couple of months, but hopefully things are looking up, and I'm going to try and get back to that more regular schedule. And to be honest, to quote a piece of advice given to me by a wonderful person in my life, I just need to hurry up and stop being such a loser. But for today, that's all we have time for. Do leave me a comment on Twitter and let me know if you enjoyed this episode or even if you didn't. And also, share your thoughts on these 18 new cast members. Who are you most excited to see on screen out of all our new cast members? Do you have any roles that you're sure one of them will play? As always, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you use. It will really help a lot after I've been away for so long. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon to talk more about Season 2 on the Daily Rings of Power podcast. Namarie.